This is Alexandra Constantine, and you're listening to the Dicenius Review, where we discuss novels, film, art, and culture from a perspective outside the mainstream. The Review is a Substack podcast, but you can listen to us on Spotify, YouTube, Apple, and anywhere else via RSS. If you enjoyed the show, please like, follow, and share this episode. I've been thinking a lot about eras, ages, periods of separable time. It can be said that we are a culture firmly in the fourth decade of the digital age. But more importantly, we are in the grip of the digital social media age, one that has developed very different than most of us expected. I'm an early millennial. I was born in 1983. My generation remembers a time before cassette tapes, movie rental stores, having to rewind your VCRs, network TV, landlines, payphones, pagers, a world before the all-pervasive digital umbra of the internet. Sometimes, talking to younger friends, I forget that the world I grew up in, a world not so dissimilar to the ones my parents and their parents grew up in, is significantly different than the world younger generations are coming up in. Social media is an interesting topic because in my lifetime, it went from a fun but ultimately meaningless thing like the early live journal and MySpace, to the ambiguous and all-encompassing Facebook that is now used mostly by Gen X and Boomer grandmothers, and finally to the attention deficit-inducing psychosis of TikTok and a general disillusionment and disinterest from most of the younger people I know. But no matter how one feels about the topic, we have to accept that the internet and social networks have had a significant impact on the indie creative scene. Can one be a writer today without trying to promote oneself on social media? From book talk to Instagram video reviews, online social media is critical to both mainstream and independent writers, almost mandatory for the latter. Can a young writer enter the world of publishing without at least some minimal use of the internet? I doubt it. The age of possible hermitude and mystery of writers like Pynchon, Salinger, and Donna Tartt seems impossible today. For good or ill, the internet is here right now. It encompasses almost everything we do, from banking to the news to consuming film and music. As writers, we cannot avoid it, and we have to engage with it both in our lives and in our work. As much as I lament the digital silence of the 90s, this podcast and my network of writers, artists, and editors would not exist without social media. So we have to accept it and approach it in an intelligent fashion, avoiding the pitfalls of all-consuming media psychosis and using it as a tool. But sometimes I doubt the usefulness of the whole endeavor. Is it even real? Are there actually real people on the other side of the cell phone screen? Spend a few minutes scrolling through the comments about the latest season of True Detective and you will doubt the reality of most commenters. It seems that so much of social media has died and all that is left is a corpse animated by parasitical social influencers and inhuman bots shilling product to each other. Are we even creating anything worth sharing? Is there any point to all of the online conversation, or is it just digital static that will degrade and disappear into the void? Has the digital era created anything of lasting value? I don't have the answer for any of this, but I know that as for my part, myself and others have tried to steer the online creative world towards more concrete, solid, longer-lasting work. Substack, the newest of the big platforms, has been a revitalizing force towards returning the digital space to a longer, more intellectual format. It is on Substack that I met fellow writer and poet Noah Rymer. Rymer is a Gen Z independent writer who has gone into the scene recently with his debut collection Harvest and novella titled Denounement. He writes what I consider literary weird fiction in a neo-Gothic mode that I find extremely well done. Welcome to the show, Noah.
Hey, Alex. It's great to be here.
Awesome.
Thank you for having me.
It's wonderful. I love your Substack, and
thank you so much.
I read your short story collection. I'm going to read your novella soon, and I'm a big fan of all your posts.
Oh, thank you.
So, to start off our conversation, right?
Sure.
Just reading your work and reading your posts, you come off extremely well read, right? And what I gather, and one of the main reasons I'm happy to have you on here, is that we share a lot of influences. Specifically, your collection is influenced by Baudelaire, which is your screen name,
Yeah.
Hieronymus Bosch, William Gibson's Neuromancer, Hunter S. Thompson, Southern Gothic of like Flannery O'Connor, and, interestingly enough, the Surrealist Manifesto of André Breton. Let's talk about your influences, all right? How did you come to writing?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I guess I actually have two of my influences right here in concrete form. I have Naked Lunch by Burroughs, and I have, of course, Denouement, The Flowers of Evil by Baudelaire. But the funny thing is, when I started writing, I wasn't really thinking of short stories or poems or really anything like that. I was actually a film critic. And you can see this a lot, especially with my collection Harvest. There's a story called Murder Trance, which is both the name of a subgenre called Murder Trance, which is like a slasher offshoot. I could probably get into that later, but it was very much influenced by the scene I kind of grew up in. That kind of the people I knew in Letterboxd, people who were writing these kind of almost gonzo narratives of films. They were doing something I'd really never seen before, and they're kind of taking what Lester Bangs did for the album review. They made a sort of low high art out of it, and it was just something that was really influential to how I started writing, because I was looking at these reviews, especially for like some really low budget garbage kind of films, you know.
The best.
And they're kind of, yeah, and they're kind of constructing this kind of surrealist kind of narrative where it was more about the intensity and the motion than any actual objective factors in the film. Like, it didn't matter that the people who made the film were teenagers and they did this like in the 1990s and they spent $5 on the gore and whatever. It was more of like how like they brought this strangeness out of it, what they're able to do with their materials, and that they were able to concoct this sort of cinema thing that didn't resemble anything like cinema. And so that was kind of my foray into writing. So I was very influenced by that. So I was a film writer to begin with, and I had a zine called TV Casualty. Very, very obscure, of course. I don't even have any copies myself. But it was a lot of fun. I was able to do like the mock-ups and the layouts, and of course it was very punk and horror inspired, and that definitely shows in the stuff that I did. I used a very grimy sort of coarse visceral language with it. It was very rough hewn, but it actually did lead to some places. Like, I was able to get an interview with one of my heroes. You may have heard of him, 42nd Street Pete. He was basically a grindhouse scenester back in the 70s. He basically grew up in the grew up on the strip on 42nd Street, and so we had this nice long rambling conversation about all the psychotronic flicks. You know, him seeing like Night of the Living Dead for the first time, and it actually being marketed to kids because they're like, oh, this is just like some kind of cheesy horror movie, but like all those kids were traumatized the first time they saw it. Right. And like he had this really fun story about. So I basically asked him, what was the craziest shit you've seen when you're in 42nd Street, like during a heyday, late 70s, early 80s. He was like, I'll tell you what, I was in, I think, the Rialto, and he's basically telling me how he was in the so I think it's the Rialto or some other place. It's got 2 stories. These are old kind of art houses. These are, well, art houses thrown into disrepair, basically, or what the grindhouses of the 80s and 70s were. Right. So he had these 2 stories, and he was sitting in the first story. He's arguing upstairs. Some guy's like kicking the shit out of some other guy, and the other guy just like flings the other guy across the balcony. He lands right in front of Pete, and Pete's like, "Yeah, that's the craziest thing that ever happened to me."
Just a guy getting thrown off the balcony. Yeah, I mean, so I'm a big movie guy myself, a big film guy. Yeah. Some of my earliest memories is going to movies, and I grew up in Southern California and Los Angeles, where that's where movies. It's all about movies over there,
Yeah, of course.
And I've gone to some fantastic theaters out there, and it's kind of a sad state of affairs right now. That the whole magic of going to movies. I try to take my young daughter to as many movies as we can, but it's not the same anymore. It seems that all theaters are like in disrepair and falling apart. And yeah, it's sad. So, if you're so much into film, why the focus on actual writing, like fiction instead of screenplays?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I actually had I wrote a film script. I wrote 2 film scripts not too long ago when I was in high school, and these were really low budget, scuzzy splatter flicks that me and a friend were gonna direct, but never came through. The pandemic went and came, and it was kind of trying to figure out what the hell I was going to do with these things. I eventually trashed them, and I didn't really start to write anything besides film reviews until I went abroad. Actually, I went to Spain, and this was important for a lot of different reasons. One was because I just wanted to get the hell out of the U.S. So this was like a very convenient opportunity. It was like studying abroad, and 2, this is actually where I first started reading poetry outside of the classroom. Me going to Spain was actually when I first got into Baudelaire, when I first got into Bukowski, and when I got into Burroughs as well. It was this kind of turning point in my life where I was able to live in the city. I lived in Madrid for the year, and I traveled around, and just traveling around and kind of seeing the sights. And kind of feeling like a bohemian at times, just
Right.
in that kind of way when you're a 20 something and you've been given all this kind of freedom and you can just do the hell whatever you want and you're out clubbing at 2 a.m. and you regret the next morning and you're just hungover. The city kind of imbued this kind of force within me, and it really inspired me to just start writing and writing and writing. And it was the first time I had really written short stories and poetry and vignettes and just journals and just everything. So yeah, I should probably talk about Baudelaire right now, but Le Fleurs du Monde, The Flowers of Evil. He was in a more autobiographical note. Baudelaire was a flaneur. He was kind of the guy who you just be a walkabout, a layabout. He'd just be kind of tracking himself throughout the city, just doing whatever. He had enough money to really do whatever he wanted. And this allowed him to kind of experience all the nightlife and all of the grandeur and the splendor of the city. But you also have the volta, the kind of the turning, where he is also able to experience the despair, the loneliness, the isolation that's within the city. And this is also, 19th century France. This is like a turning point for France as well, because you have early industrialization and you have, I guess, more industrialized prostitution. You have all the brothels and like stuff like that. And so you really see it within his work that these are the words of a man who's lived around and who's ultimately rootless. And that's something I really connected with, because I always felt like all of my life I was just kind of rootless guy. I was kind of drifting back and forth, and that's why I did a lot of Madrid. I drifted.
Right, and what you're saying right now actually hits home real hard, because I had a friend, and ironically enough, during college, she was one of my best friends, and during college, she went on a study abroad program for 1 year in Madrid also.
Really?
And around the same time she did that, I moved from Los Angeles to Chicago. And I loved living in Chicago for the same reasons you described, Madrid, because I was by myself for the first time. I was completely a stranger. I was a flaneur, just like Baudelaire. Yeah. And I would walk around, I would hop on a train and get off on different random train stations and just walk about and look at things and stop into random bars and restaurants. And there's a freedom to that when you're in a city completely devoid of connection to your life. And especially me being an immigrant to the United States, I really don't have any family outside my immediate family here. But my friend said that the first city you live in, the first big city you live in, as an adult, tends to have a lifetime impact on you. And I think that's true. And that's how Chicago feels for me. And also Tokyo. I spent a few years living in Tokyo, where I did, walking around, taking trains, looking at things, meeting people, randomly. And I think cities and the exploration of cities on foot has such a significant impact on art. There's so much focus on the city, the psycho space of the city, the psycho geography of a city. And I find that stuff fascinating. Even where I live now, which is more of a smaller, more rural, it's not really rural. It's outside of Savannah, Georgia, which is far from rural. But compared to Los Angeles and Chicago, it is. It still has its own distinct, urban feel. And that's such a fascinating thing. And also, you brought up, you kind of pre-jumped my next question, kind of my next was that, no, it's awesome, right? You talked about Baudelaire and the whole flaneur thing and walking around. And it's clear from your work and your posts that you have a fascination with the fin de siècle era of France.
I really do.
And for people that don't know what that is, it means the end of the century. It's an era of French culture and history that is from about like 1890 to around the turn of the 20th century. And it's kind of marked by like decadence and a sort of almost a millennial kind of era thing, but in a more French 19th century style than what we had in the 2000s. And I'm a big fan of Huysmans. I don't know if you ever read his stuff, or
I have.
It's one of the big decadent poems. But you like surrealism, which came a little bit around that time, but a little bit later, and a lot of the art from the era, the neo-romantics and the stuff that leads into the Dada and all that stuff. The whole period between like 1880 and the beginning of World War II happens to be my favorite. And it seems that you're kind of in the same space right there, So where does the love of that come from?
Sure, that's a really good question as well. When you brought up decadence, I was kind of thinking of kind of the society we live in. This sounds kind of trite, I know, but I think my love of Baudelaire, my love of Rimbaud, my love of the Wanderer, the Flaneur, kind of comes about because we've been so inundated with commodity, so much convenience. We have everything at just right outside our reach. We could just grab anything we really wanted to. We have convenience stores, we have private transport, we have drugs, sex, everything really, and it all is accessible by some delivery to us by the internet. There are so many different conduits for a multitude of things to arrive to us, we're just absolutely spoiled for choice. Like I can't even think of like a medieval king living like I would right now, and I'm just like this middle class guy attending college. So I think, a lot of my interest in the fin de siècle era comes because I think we are sort of living in a fin de siècle era of all that decadence, of all this excess, and I really kind of see myself in their kinds of shoes. And I think another point just about Baudelaire, I'll try not to gab on about Baudelaire this whole conversation, but as a Catholic, I find his poetry very, very interesting. I also find it really interesting too, because whenever I mention Baudelaire around other Catholics, like, oh, I hate that guy, but they'll always seem to like, people like Lovecraft, even though he's just as much as a nihilist as Baudelaire was.
Right, right.
But I think Baudelaire has the added vantage point of him being kind of this like poet mali, a damned poet, and he's also Catholic as well. And what I've read from a lot of his poems is that he's in this constant sort of fervor state of damnation and salvation. That's what his main thing for me is. It's not simply about him in the decadence and the excess and him, thinking about woman like a decaying corpse and just being so, slavish and just, profane with how he's using the language, but it's also about him being a Catholic. And I think that's what a lot of people seem to miss out in Baudelaire, that he's a Catholic poet. I wouldn't say first and foremost, because he's a very conflicted character, but it's shown a lot in his poetry, and it's just very interesting to me that people kind of skip over that, or they just kind of tend to focus on the damnation aspect of it. When Baudelaire is very clearly invoking God, he's invoking salvation, he's invoking, this desire to be saved, because again, he is a damned poet, but he's also looking for redemption, probably through poetry.
Right, absolutely. And this is a topic we brought up on one of the last episodes I did with Mark Marlowe, which is the religion in writing. And there is absolutely this sense where you have people that, are a religious writer and a Christian writer or whatever, and they come at the fiction, they come at the work of art from such a surefire, way that it comes off manufactured. It comes off as, in a way, propaganda. Definitely. When I think that the best religious writing is not from religious people, so per se, but from a writer who happens to be Catholic, a writer that happens to be Catholic Orthodox, like Dostoevsky, whose religion, whose belief, as conflicted and as violent and as contradictory, influences the work itself, where you have somebody like, I think I said this in the last podcast, but Tarkovsky, right? We talk about movies, right? Tarkovsky made some of the most Christian movies of the 20th century, in my opinion. All right.
Definitely.
Andrei Rublev, extremely Christian movie.
Stalker.
I was about to say Stalker's about hope and meaning and, in prayer and so much. But this guy himself, while he was an Orthodox Christian, he was living in the midst of, post-Stalin Russia, right? The 60s and 70s Russia. Growing up in Eastern Europe, religion was not cool in Eastern Europe during that era. But he was living during that time. And on top of that, he wasn't a great individual himself. He was,
definitely.
He was a philanderer, and he had very mystical beliefs in a lot of things. And he would not by any means be called a good Christian, but is there a good Christian? And does it require a fundamentally dogmatic individual artist to write Christianity? And I don't think so. I think that Christianity itself, of whatever variety, can influence you because it should be part of your soul. And that's how you get true Christian work, not through sitting down and I'm going to write Christianity down, because at that point you're just writing dogma,
Yeah, you're just preaching to the choir. There's no meaning for it.
Right.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up because this has been a big thing for me as a Catholic, of course. I hate most of Catholic literature. I find it very cheesy. I find it very self-indulgent. It's absolutely horrific to me. It's kind of the thing that Flannery O'Connor brought up in her text, I think it's Mystery and Manners. She was talking about how you don't want to veer off into the grotesque, but you don't want to veer off into the, she didn't say the word indulgent, but it was something close to that. And of course, she was talking about the works of her time. And of course, Flannery O'Connor is, she's one of my favorite Catholic authors, but she was also, during her time, practically crucified by the Catholic press because they had no idea what the hell she was doing.
Right.
And that's how good she was. She was so transgressive by being so Catholic. But you take a secular person, like, here, read Wise Blood. They look through, what the hell am I reading? She's Catholic? What the hell is this? Because you have like this Oedipus Rex ending. And it's like, the dude blinded himself. He slept with a prostitute. It's like, it's so crazy what she's doing, but she's also so radical in how she approaches Christianity, because she's always approaching it not from, this is going to sell good to Catholic authors, but she's approaching it from, how can I sell this to secular authors? And that's why I try to do my fiction. It's kind of a pain to me, but I think it's also kind of a blessing that nobody has mentioned the Catholic aspects of my work. And I think that's for the best, because I'd rather have it fly under the radar for people than for people like, oh yeah, he's just preaching the choir. He's just talking to good Catholics out there, Mr. Goody Two Shoes, Mr. Radshred over here. I am Mr. Radshred. Done some terrible things in my life, not afraid to admit it. But yeah, when it comes to kind of religiosity in my work, with Harvest, you have the first story is Sleepless, and then you have the last story is Fin de Cycle, however you pronounce it. Mm-hmm. I kind of work those in as a bookend, and Sleepless is kind of my reworking of the Baudelairean damned poet, and the Fin de Cycle is my kind of taking that damned poet and showing him redemption. If I could just pull up the quote real quick.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah. There we go. Here's the the last sentence of Fin de Cycle. All of that which I have written, malleable, wilts compared to the unchanging word. Now, of course, the word that I'm talking about there, that's a devoutable. That's the word of God, and it's the poet Malby choosing to, I guess, in a sense, toss away his writings, toss away, the necessity to be great, to be grand, and he's giving himself to Christ, and he's giving himself up to the Father. He's allowing himself to be crucified, but not in a sort of in the way that the poet Malby would be. He's not giving himself the pleasure, to die of pleasure, to die of his addictions, but he's giving himself to die for a greater purpose. So that's why I put that in there. And I won't hold up too much of this part of the conversation, but I also want to mention in my novella Denouement, Denouement, the French terms they're terrible. I can't pronounce them. I know you haven't read it yet, but I kind of employ the same kind of tactic within that novel to just give you the short and narrow. It's very narrativeless. I chose not to have any particular story, and the way I approached religiosity in that novella was I basically had it be sort of like a negative approach to theology. God is known by his absence. And you definitely get that with a lot of the scenes within that story. It's sort of violent or atavistic, but in a very kind of calm, collected sense. There's a lot of excess, a lot of convenience that I kind of poke fun of. So it's kind of like a Juvenalian satire on modernity, on how we have so much convenience in the world and how we're so godless as a nation that a lot of the kids like me are kind of drifting, hence the name Denouement, the literary term for unraveling, because that's what basically the characters do, is they unravel, and they get to a point where they just can't hold like their trauma within themselves, and they have to spill out, and it just leads to confession upon confession upon confession. But of course, it's always to a secular authority, to their friends, or to themselves, or just to the void that exists outside of them in the suburban hellscape. I guess a short spoiler I have at the end, my main character, she escapes from the night. The dawn comes. There's a sort of hopefulness to it, and she encounters this blues singer, who's singing about being ready for the apocalypse, being ready for God's second coming, and there's just this little shrivel of hope in there, this little sliver of hope, and I have that end with her writing basically the events of what happened in the novella, and so you have a little bit of that there, but I just don't want to make it overt. That's the main thing for me. I don't want it to be like, I'm not painting this in bold colors. It's going to be more on the subtext. I'm just going to work it in there. If you get it, very good. Thank you for close reading the text. If you don't, that's okay, because God works in different ways, and I'd rather it be more subtle and kind of be something you have to kind of chew on to really get the meaning than just like have it be out there. Of course.
Right. And one of the things, and you see this on, I would say, both sides of the spectrum, which is a lot of people forget that art, fiction, film, is about truth. Fundamentally, it's about truth, right? It's about showing the truth. And on one end of the secular kind of spectrum of writers, you see this in the online kind of like leftish kind of era. They want a fantasy of what the world is. They want this perfect world of, everybody's happy, multicultural, and perfect. And then on the trad kind of Christian world, you also they want the same thing, a different flavor, but the same thing, a utopia. And you have these utopian mindsets where they criticize anybody that really tells the truth, because the truth, whether you're a Christian or secular, whether you're a Buddhist or anything like that, is that the world kind of sucks. And the best of people can do really fucked up shit,
Yeah.
But they can also be good people. And that's the truth, and it's rough in our era, in our age, to portray characters that do the wrong thing, and sometimes they do the right thing also, And what's a hero? It's hard because we cannot just write Conan the Barbarian pastiche of like heroes and knights, or guys with ray guns, and then or just good guys that accept everyone and have nothing but 21st century political thoughts in their heads in whatever setting,
Sure.
So you actually are leading me to my next part, which, by the way, your novella sounds fantastic. I can't wait to read it.
Thank you.
But you mentioned the blues, all right, which leads me to my next topic, which is you seem from your post once again to be really influenced by music, punk rock specifically. And now, me,
definitely,
I'm a big music guy too. So let's talk about music. All right. What are some of your musical influences on your work?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. I think I can kind of go like buy my books, buy my posts, whatever. When I think of my collection Harvest, I think a lot about Miles Davis. Miles Davis is a huge influence on me, specifically Bitches Brew. That's kind of like my editing music. So that's like always my background. I think it really helps for me to have unscrew from any kind of strict narrative sense. So just having that in the background kind of helps me to kind of cut out like any unnecessary syntax or grammar or anything like that. Kind of make things run faster, if you know what I mean. And that's also kind of like, with Burroughs, that's why I learned a lot from Naked Lunch, is that if you want the machine to run faster, you got to take a lot of stuff out, a lot of unnecessary things. I think everything in Naked Lunch is necessary in a very strange way. I think it's necessary for Burroughs to say, because if you look at the prose of Naked Lunch, it's very disconnected. It's very discombobulated. There's a famous quote that if you leave on one page of Naked Lunch, you're not going to be able to tell where the hell you left off, because it is this like neon arabesque, and I'm stealing a line from Burroughs, of course, in that. This neon arabesque of sight and sound and quality and texture that is just so rich but cobbled together. So that's why I try to have my stuff be as well, rich but cobbled together. Now, for other influences besides like Miles Davis, when it comes to the music side of things, I listen to a lot of Acid House as well. That was very particular to when I was writing Dead Los Angeles, because you have the club scene at the end.
I could see that. I could see that.
Yeah,
and that was actually my favorite story in the collection.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
I appreciate it. So Acid House, some free jazz, definitely punk rock. But I think the punk rock influence shows more in my novella, because one of the opening scenes is that my main character is in a punk club, and I'm describing the kind of the Dionysian rites of punk rock, which is really funny because Harvest was actually going to be called Dionysian Rites. But I went for Harvest because I wanted more like a full core feel to it, and
Right.
Down East Rice just didn't really give that, didn't really have that flavor to it. But yeah, so that's kind of how parse down my musical influence. I think those are like the big three. I think that's really it when it comes to music. Not sure what else I could tell you.
Well, what kind of punk music do you like? Are we talking about like
Yeah.
late 70s, 80s stuff, or some of the newer 90s, 2000s kind of? Well, is there any punk anymore? I mean, I don't think.
Yeah, I could tell you, I could spin off about like modern punk because I really do like the contemporary stuff that's been
Really?
coming out. But I like, the big like 70s scenes, like the big three. LA is fantastic, underrated. New York, of course. I really like the UK punk scene as well. I like some stuff in the 80s, some stuff in the 90s, post punk, post hardcore. And yeah, on the topic of more contemporary punk, I know definitely a few really good artists albums that have come out like in the 2020s. I'm thinking of Lumpy and the Dumpers. They're a fantastic, really scuzzy kind of egg crust punk band, which sounds kind of, I'm not sure if you understand what the egg slash crust dichotomy, or sorry, not crust, chain, egg and chain dichotomy. But it's kind of going back to like the 70s influence, like the stuff like the Ramones and Devo and
Right.
like UK82 hardcore stuff. So Sick Thoughts is really good as well. He has a really good horror punk style. I usually just listen to the Misfits for my horror punk, but I found he's insanely catchy. He has fantastic riffs, really fun vocals, very self-aware. So I'd highly recommend him as well.
Right. I mean, absolutely. That Misfits are pretty much, if you don't listen to them, what are you talking about here, right?
Yeah.
I had a punk era in my youth, right? It lasted for about a year or so, and I realized that I tend to prefer the more melodic, more rhythm kind of driven music, like the Clash. But I'm really in the post punk. Like if I were to pick one era of music that like I want to live in, is new wave and post punk. Joy Division, right? When it comes to literary influences, Joy Division, I mean, they've got songs named after Dostoevsky's work.
Yeah, and this is actually something I don't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
This is actually something you're going to one of my points that I was going to make soon. But yeah, a lot of my literary influence actually comes from punk. A lot of what I read, like, Pere Ubu, I picked up the Alpha play because of their band. I picked up Gogol's Dead Souls because of Joy Division. I probably picked up a few novels from Public Image. Although I'm not sure if they mentioned any explicit, thing in their music. I picked up Camus, L'Intermédiaire, The Stranger. Pronouncing that terribly, I know, because of the Cure killing.
Oh, yeah. You know what? On a side note, for some freaking reason, that Cure song is not on goddamn Spotify anymore, and I can't find it, which is killing an Arab, right? Which is the Camus. It's based on the Camus novella, right, or long short story, and I think people thought it was a racist,
that makes
song,
sense,
but it's not, because like I said, it's based on Camus' freaking novel, which is a fantastic short novel. You can read it in about an hour and a half. But yeah, absolutely, same thing with me, right? Joy Division really got me reading J.G. Ballard.
Yeah, right. Same here. That's why I picked up High Rise.
Right, exactly. Joy Division's Atrocity Exhibition, which is one of my favorite songs. I'm like, all this stuff is based off J.G. Ballard. I'll read some J.G. Ballard. And
there you go.
Last year I had like a stretch of just J.G. Ballard, and it's pretty depressing if it, intertwined with other stuff. But yeah, music is such a critical thing, and what we're talking about really shows how, music, film, the visual arts, and the written art intertwine, and how having a community of sharing that kind of like that psychospheric space, that creative space, is such a critical thing, because we can take from the past and take from, and move to the future. And one thing that I've noticed about you is that you are a very goddamn well-read dude. All right.
Oh, thank you.
You're one of the people that we can have this conversation, and we're talking about stuff that I'm going to guarantee you a good 50% of the people that follow us probably never even read or heard of,
Yeah.
And unfortunately, in the independent scene, in the indie publishing scene, there's a kind of a iconoclastic Philistine kind of vibe where they hate everything that a college literature class would teach you, they won't read the classics at all. I'm just going to write my own thing, which is cool in a punk rock kind of way. But at the same time, it kind of punk rock itself, for example, cannot be punk rock in a vacuum. Punk rock exists because it's a response to the 70s and the 60s excess and stupid hippie shit, you know. I mean, or the Elvis stuff, you know. And then post-punk cannot exist without punk because that also is a
naturally it follows through,
right? A response.
And I mean, like a lot of like especially like the 70s, 80s punks, they were big autodidacts. You know, that's why you have so many literature references, you know, a lot of kind of film references within that early kind of wave, that early strain. That's where I got a lot of my inspiration from. And, you know, on the topic of punk, it's a big reason why I became a writer as well, because they told me I could do it myself. And so I did. And I started writing up that zine I told you about. That was my film zine that kind of followed through into, you know, how I wrote my literature. I wrote my literature punk rock, even though, you know, like you said, your words, not mine. I'm well read. A dubious claim, but I'll take it. But you know, it's a lot of these kind of like rough-hewn aspects of just like, you know, here's a pencil, here's some paper, just do it yourself, make your own fanzine. You know, here's a guitar, here's 3 chords, start your band, and that kind of followed through as well. And we were talking about something on the little pre-show about my literary pub, Pere Ube, which you're curious about the name of. So I started Pere Ube because I was kind of fed up with chucking all of my stuff to literary mags, you know, who are more highfalutin, who are more kind of reserved and kind of, you know, boring, honestly, and not really, you know, getting much out of that. You know, it's kind of like a numbers game.
Absolutely.
It's, you know, you send your schlock out and most people don't like it because like it's like, what the hell are you talking about? And you know, they always send you the well-meaning but ultimately annoying sort of response letter like, we really loved your stuff, but you know, please don't send us your shit ever again. Thank you, love you, goodbye.
Right, a year later, so you have to wait. Oh, and by the way, we only take you know, one like request a year, and you know, no simultaneous submissions. So basically, wait 6 years for us to tell you no, thank you for your work that we'd pay you like $20 if we actually did pay you in the first place. But,
exactly.
And then they act like, you know, oh my God, why don't people read anymore? You know, it's because there's no point to sending stuff. Like the idea of like sending all your work and waiting years for a reply, you know, even months, even like 6 months is too much for me. In the digital age is just nonsense to me, you know?
Definitely. And that aspect has really influenced how I run things as an editor-in-chief at my place. Because the way I thought about it, I was like, okay, what do I not like about what people are doing nowadays in that kind of, you know, I guess you could say neoliberal realm where, you know, most submissions are either by, you know, like white women or, you know, by POC people. I'm a person of color. I don't really give a shit about like most of like the literature that comes out from people of color because it's always focused on like the narrow aspects of their particular culture, my particular culture, whatever. And it's just not good literature. They think trauma is good literature. It's fucking not. You got to write well to make trauma good literature, you know? But aside from that little rant, I was thinking, how do I really want to do this? So I instated things like I would like a punk rock scene. I built it from the ground up, grassroots. I keep it small. I keep it consistent. I keep it steady. I can keep it a little sloppy sometimes because I want people to send me, you know, more unvarnished stuff that doesn't reek of like MFA holding, you know, kind of Starbucks drinking kind of people, if you get what I mean.
Absolutely. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have an MFA, and the idea of even going to get an MFA disgusts me. Like I can't physically even stomach the idea.
It's nauseating.
Right. I can't stomach the idea because, and I think, was it, what's his name on X on Twitter or whatever? The guy Alex something. He's an MFA guy, but he's a Cuban American living in Miami, and he talks about how like exactly like you said.
Oh, Alex Perez.
Alex Perez, right? That's his name.
Yeah,
Right? I love his stuff, you know. And he talks about how you know all like minority stuff is just trauma fiction. Like it's all make believe for rich upper class white women who want to kind of go slumming, you know. So unless if you're Hispanic, right? If you're Hispanic, you got to write about abuelita's mango trees, and if you're, you know,
magical
right, exactly. And if you're from Africa, you got to talk about how you're an immigrant in Europe and somebody touches your fucking hair or something like that, and it's just nonsense because it's not what humanity's about. You know, we're not
exactly.
I mean, I'm an immigrant, right? So I could probably write about the immigrant experience in America, you know, whatever. You know, I'm the wrong kind of immigrant because I'm from Eastern Europe, you know. But
yeah, exactly.
I mean, I can I could probably play that up. I mean, if I was gay, I'd doubly play it up, but I'm not.
Yeah, definitely. Get more brownie points for that.
But that's not what we want to write about. That doesn't define,
not.
It doesn't define me, it's a part of me, but it's not me, being where I'm born, there's so many elements to who we are. And you go to Barnes and Noble, any of the bookstores, and you look at the new novels, and it's just all just the same fucking thing. And it's the same thing because the same kind of people get published by mainstream. It's the same people go to the MFAs because they have to be well off, MFA programs might be free because, to get in, but you still have to pay rent, and somebody that's coming from a real lower class or real working class lifestyle cannot afford to go to, college for 2-3 years to get an MFA, to get a job doing nothing. Right.
Exactly.
I mean? Right.
No, I get exactly what you mean. It's, it's why my favorite type of submissions are the people who have probably never published anything outside of this submission to me before. I have no MFA, probably have no real writing experience, or, it's just these kind of people getting it from the ground up, and they have 5 lines of bio. It's a really casual email. Hi, this is my name. Please accept my stuff or consider it. I'll look at it. And it's fantastically written. It's usually humorous. It's darkly satirical. It's got some flavor to it. It's got some real juice. It's got some, as Bukowski would put it, blood. And at the same time, I receive all these emails from these MFA holders because, fortunately, Pere Ube got listed on Duotrope, so now I'm getting those kinds of people coming in. So I get this mass immigration of people who, go to nice colleges, who drive probably nice cars, drink good coffee, the normies.
I mean, I like good coffee. All right, it's not.
No, I'm not trying to crucify you here, but you know what I mean. The Starbucks crowd. I like a good cup myself, but the people who have a whole paragraph of bio, people who are describing who they are, where they're from, their achievements, all of these literary awards that they're garnered,
their struggles.
Their struggles, and I'll read 2 lines into what they've submitted. It's just absolute crap. It's kind of like what I was saying before. It's either kind of autofiction. It's about your boyfriend broke up with you, and this is how you're gonna express it, or it's by POC trauma. Thank you very much. Have a nice day. Goodbye. Get the hell out of my inbox. Now let me invite this person who, has had no published experience whatsoever, who has written this fantastic poem that really, speaks to life, speaks to truth, speaks to the grit of it all. I'm going to publish you. You're fantastic. I adore what you're doing. Please send me more stuff.
Right. And for example, I want to read POC stuff or, different sexualities and that kind of stuff. It cannot be a circus show for rich people. Within so much of the MFA stuff you see over in, at Barnes and Noble is basically rich immigrant girl whose daddy pays for college, goes to Europe, rides the cock carousel, is depressed, goes home, takes SSRIs. You know what I mean?
It's real Benadryl fiction. I hate it.
It's the same stuff. And it's oh my God, it's so boring. Sucks. It doesn't say anything about our current age. It doesn't say anything about our current people. And I'm open-minded though. I want to read stuff. I read, I think the Nobel Prize winning fiction from a few years ago. The the Goon Squad one. I don't know. I can't remember it right now.
Goon Squad. I don't know.
Either way, I read that. It was kind of a big literary thing.
Sure.
And it was good. I thought it was great. But it was great because it was very different than the usual kind of MFA stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it was an older writer. That's kind of what made it good. Also read, listened to a lot of Nick Cave. So.
Oh, yeah. I love some Cave.
You have to listen to Nick Cave. I need to throw that in here. I don't know if you follow he does a weekly kind of newsletter.
Yeah. Was it Red Right Hand, right?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Notes from the Red Right Hand. I don't follow
his newsletter. I got to start reading it, but I do love his songs. I also forgot to mention for Harvest, just listen to goth music, especially Nick Cave, was a huge influence on some of the more weird fiction pieces I put in there, especially something like Finsfield Morrow, which is the one about the vampires.
Right.
Big, just putting a lot of Nick Cave into that on the musical side.
I mean, the more Nick Cave, the better. It's some
honestly
some Christian death in there and stuff. I'm,
Oh
I'm
yeah, I
a
love
bit,
me some Christian Grey.
I'm a, like that whole era, like the whole goth club era was where I
Chef's
dwell,
kiss.
man. You know,
Yeah,
that's
that's your little cave. That's your abattoir over there.
yeah, like I'm gonna roll around. You know, I wish if I was 20 again, I'd go back to all the
Roll
LA
around in
goth clubs.
mascara and just
Yeah,
yeah. Oh, I'd
like
love to do that, man.
people don't even know the struggle of growing up in the early 2000s, where
Mm.
if you wanted to wear tight jeans, you had to wear your girlfriend's pants. All right,
Yeah,
all these young guys can go to the store and they can buy all the tight jeans you want. I
yeah,
had to steal my girlfriend's jeans to go to the club. All right.
yeah. This was like Janko era. You had like
Yeah,
the big baggy
exactly.
skater
Right.
pants.
Everybody's
This is
wearing,
the true underrepresented minority, Alex.
yeah,
The goth kids who grew up in the
that was
2000s.
my struggle, guys. All right. Was wearing my girlfriend's jeans because I'm not wearing pipes or Jinkos or whatever the hell they were
Yeah,
called.
and I guess I'll open up about my own kind of pants struggles here. I used to wear Tiger of London bondage pants not too long ago, actually, like my freshman year in college. And you have to understand, this is a very where I go. It's a very Catholic traditional college. So I was getting weird looks from everywhere, and there was that, and then I also had this other outfit where, for whatever ungodly reason, it was like my pseudo goth phase. I was trying to look like Caesar from the Count of Dr. Caligari. So I had like a black turtleneck on. I had some tight jeans. I had some Doc Martens, and I had this little razor blade necklace. It was terrible, but I think I have the photo somewhere. I'd love to show it to you.
No, there's some photos of me from that era where I had side of my head shaved with the hair over the
Yeah,
eyes. I used to dye
gotcha.
the blue black hair dye,
Oh man,
everywhere. So I had to
yeah, I get
straighten my
you.
hair because my hair is naturally curly. So I had to,
Yeah,
it was a mess. It took me like an hour. Do you know how hard it
yeah.
is when you wear those like knee high kind of boots that like lace all the way
Mhm.
up, right? And you come home from
Yeah.
a bar of night of drinking and you're about to throw up and there's no freaking way you can get those boots off.
Oh my god. Yeah, I couldn't imagine.
Nightmare,
So I
right?
just wear sneakers now.
That is my struggle, guys. All right.
Honestly, represent, dude.
Yeah.
Represent.
Now I just wear like flip flops everywhere because I'm an
There
old
you
man.
go. Yeah.
So I really like what you said about the whole punk do-it-yourself thing, right? And the whole
Yeah,
independent thing. I don't know if you've read my about on my Substack. It's all about that. That's what I care
gotcha.
about. That's why I'm doing this stupid podcast, right? I'm doing it
Yeah, of
because
course.
it's do-it-yourself. I was like, you know what? Why not?
It's grassroots,
I
man.
I want to hear good conversation about novels and authors and film and everything, and I can't find it. So I'm just going to make it myself. All right, that's kind of how what my goal was here, and of course in my own writing, I don't want to talk about here, but that's the best thing about it, right? Now I often think, how about would you actually go mainstream? Would you ever submit a
Mhm.
novel to a mainstream publication like Penguin Random House or something like that?
Sure. I don't think I would. It's not because like it's like, oh, I just don't want to sell out. I don't want to become a poser. I mean, that's kind of part of it. But my heart belongs to the indie scene. My heart belongs to the alternative. It's not a fact that like I would be scared of like, kind of selling out. It's just the fact that I wouldn't be able to do it. That's not in my DNA. I've just been brought up so much within the DIY confines that it's just literally out of my nature. It's not my essence, if you want to get metaphysical about it.
Oh, and it
I
makes
just wouldn't be able
perfect
to do it.
sense. Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think I feel exactly the same way. It's like people say, "Oh, well, what if they want to turn your book into a movie?" I'm like, I'm not interested in that.
Yeah. Hey,
Unless David Lynch wants to do it or something like that.
yeah,
Then
exactly.
yeah, but
If someone wants to direct like a movie based on my novel, find me some art school kid, give him $20,000, see what he comes up with. I want to see what he's gonna do. I'll
right.
be there on the set. I'll be helping him out. I'll be going over the notes. I'll be highlighting, annotating. Just don't give me to like some big budget producer. Don't give me to fucking Wes Anderson.
Right.
Get that guy out of here.
I hate
Don't give me to one of those big blockbuster kind of guys.
I could probably do an entire podcast on why I hate Wes Anderson. So
I join you.
it's my
I
hatred,
into that, yeah.
like my one. I don't know why it makes me
Yeah.
vomit when I think about his movies. I really tried.
Yeah.
And Moonrise Kingdom pissed me off so much. Like everything about them made me sick. I hated it.
Yeah, same here. And I think it's because of the inherent
Right.
artificiality, what Anderson is doing. Everything is so pre-planned.
So twee, so fake
Exposed.
twee.
Exactly. Yeah. And what we're talking about, we're talking about punk rock, we're talking about Burroughs, we're talking about Baudelaire. These people have lived. These people have been in the gutter and back. These are the people who just got it within their veins, who just know what it's like to live and to have lived and to have experienced and ultimately to have died.
Right. Right. And yeah. Now, you know what? So we're talking about movies, actually. And a conversation I always bring up with different writers is, do you think that novels translate well into film? Because, okay, so I'm going to preface this, right? A lot of people say that the novel's dead. In my opinion, I don't think that the novel's dead, because the written word, the novel, can do something that no other media, film, 3D face masks or whatever nightmare they're coming up with, just can never come close, which is, the internal, philosophical and emotional feeling that you can get from a novel where you're actually in the character, as opposed to looking at the character through a window. And I think that a lot of great novels don't translate well into film because of that. Because ultimately, there's always a screen. You're always looking through a window when you're watching a movie. So do you think that novels translate well into film? What do you think about that?
It's a very interesting point. I definitely agree with you that there's like something else that's within the novel, it's like quintessence that really can't be touched by other like visual mediums. I kind of think of it, like with very obvious examples like Blood and Rain by Cormac McCarthy, like the classic and adaptable novel. It's just there's just too much going on in there to condense even to like a 3 to 4 hour film.
It's impossible.
Aside from that, it's just there's no way you can translate it outside of its given form. And I think for me, like a lot of the stuff that I write, I will admit, I will cop out to being very cinematically inspired. I'm kind of thinking about a lot of directors. I'm thinking about Fellini in this one. Here's like, Mario Bava, that's like a certain film angle that he would use, or this is like his constructed set. Or maybe I'm going with a little Richard Linklater here. But at the very same time, what you have in novels is what you can't have in any other medium, and that's imagination.
Right.
At the end of the day, the reader is ultimately the one who's going to be the cinematographer, who's going to be the sound design, who's going to be giving the background and the depth and the light, who's constructing this your scene in their head. So it's not exactly a one-to-one thing. Like if you put on something like on the topic of Fellini 8.5, everyone's going to see the same film because it is what Fellini is showing you. It is what he has planned out. It is he has done these shots. He has done these lines, he's done dialogue. That's all very concrete, but the novel still rests within this sort of I guess you could say supernatural plane, if you just want to put it like that.
Absolutely.
The novel as something spiritual.
It is beyond the visual. It's beyond the concrete. Exactly. It's in its own realm, and that's why I don't think the novel is anywhere near dying. And I'm one of the white pill guys when it comes to literature. I think it's an everlasting form for us. I mean, since the beginning.
I think so too.
And I think, but I'm not a film hater. I love movies. Right?
Yeah, of course.
And I think that it's great that people get influenced by movies and sometimes approach the novel from a cinematographic kind of way.
Yeah.
As long as people, in my opinion, should not write a novel like a movie. And I see this a lot in a lot of like modern kind of contemporary writing. I think my goal as a writer is to write a novel that cannot be filmed.
Yeah, that's the same for me as well.
That's a success like metric I have, right? Because if it can be filmed, then why the fuck am I writing it and not making it into a movie in the first place? You know what I mean? Like,
no, I completely understand.
Right. So that's kind of how I look at it. Like, Thomas Pynchon's novels, right? They can't be filmed. I mean, they did Inherent Vice, and it's all right. I like the movie, but it's not great. All right. So we are getting close to the end. So I want to ask you a few more questions. All right. What do you have? What's the plan for the future? What's next? What do you have coming up now?
Another great question. Well, I have some chapbooks up to be released. This is like the stuff that I just have to put it up. I have one called, I think, Suburban Gothic, which is a collection of like previously published short stories on Bruiser, on Do Not Submit, that kind of stuff. I'm also planning my next novella, which is the title in the works is called Navi. And it's basically about this punk rock kid who's kind of set within this really strange high school. It's basically like a combination. It's like Repo Man meets Lovecraft. Honestly, it's a very strange kind of thing.
Okay.
You have secret agents. You have a high school death cult led by popular girls. You have an Oregon harvester within the high school itself. This is all situated within like this high school basket case outcast who's just trying to play a few gigs here and there. find out the meaning of life, maybe, have sex with a girl he likes, and, maybe eventually find love along the way. So while it's going to be like a very crazy narrative, it's also going to be something very human. It's just focusing on this guy. And of course, it's going to be very autobiographical. It's going to be like me directing my 8.5. Like, this is definitely me. And this is just how my life has been. And yeah, I think that's kind of it for what I've been planning in the works. And, Pere Ube is still going to be publishing stuff. We haven't gotten the authors yet, but honestly, I would love to edit a manuscript one of these days. If you or anyone would have any ideas, just send them my way, honestly.
Well, absolutely. Absolutely. And you know what? I always think, and I think the best thing about you, for example, I think that the independent scene is starving for good editors. That's where we're lacking. I think that the do-it-yourself thing is outstanding, but behind every great writer is a good editor. And we need to bring in editors into a scene for it to really happen. In the same way, a music producer, a studio engineer, it was critical to the creation of all the great music scenes.
Definitely.
Right.
Yeah, everyone needs a Phil Spector behind their own.
Right. Somebody needs Spector all the time. Where can readers find your work? I know I'm going to share links to Substack and everywhere. But if you want to let us know real quick where we can find some of your stuff.
Yeah, Substack, Young Baudelaire. That's, I guess, my main hub. I also have Pere Ube, my literary mag, which is where I'll post occasionally, but it's also where I kind of just, post other people. A lot of prose. I think I have an excerpt from a novel or something over there, some poems and whatnot. And I'll eventually post my own stuff. Like, I have a little PDF section where I have some zines and some chapbooks that are just there if you want to go check them out. I have my books. I have Harvest, which I'll send a link to you if you don't already have it. And then I have 2 other books which are going to be coming out in print soon. I have one right here. This is my poetry collection, Poems for St. John's Apocalypse. So it's a lot of stuff I've collected over the years, and some stuff that's new, some stuff that's never been released, and also my previously mentioned novella, Denouement, Denouement, will be coming out in print as well. I'm just finishing up, just tweaking a little here and there, and just waiting for some beta readers to finish checking it out. And yeah, that's pretty much what I have out right now. So if you guys want to check that out.
Yeah, I'm going to make sure I'm going to put all the links on the Substack post. That way people can come and grab your stuff and read it because it's fantastic. All right, so I'm going to let you go now, but I got one more question.
Hold on. I got one more thing. I don't want to cut you off.
No, please do.
But all right. I know we talked about this. We hyped it up. We didn't say too much about it because we got derailed, which is always a good thing when you're doing a podcast. But the origins of Pere Ube's name.
Oh, yeah. There we go. I want to know.
So basically, this is a what do you call it when it's you're putting 2 words together to make one word or one phrase? It's you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
It's like smoke and fog. Right. Yeah, whatever it is. I'm a literature major, but I don't even know what the hell I'm talking about. So that's whatever that is. You have the Pere comes from Pere Ubu, which of course is the post-punk band, as well as the titular character Alfageri's Ubu Roy. So that's where the Pere comes from, and the Ube is actually it's the name for a Filipino sweet and purple yam.
Right. That's what I thought. Actually, that's what I thought.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Right. I spent a decade living in Southeast Asia. In Japan, so I'm quite familiar with the purple potato.
Yeah, it's different from taro, though. It's definitely different from taro.
No, I know. There's a bunch of interesting differences between all of those, and then you have the weird soursop melon, which nobody's ever heard of except for Asians.
Yeah. We have a lot of weird fruits, but yeah, that's where my literary pub's name comes from.
Okay, all right, I like that. And now I actually have it open right here, and I was looking through some of this stuff, and it's all great.
Oh, cool.
So now for the final goodbye question, all right?
Sure.
And then I'm going to start doing this for every single guest. So if you future guests need to pay attention right now, because I'm going to ask you this.
Take some notes.
One of the most valuable things of listening to podcasts, reading Substacks, being on social media, is discovering new and old work new to me. So you as a writer, let me know, what are you reading right now? What's one book you recommend somebody reads and one movie you recommend somebody watches? Okay. It doesn't have to be old. It doesn't have to be new, but sure. Something, if I walked up to you, hey man, what can I watch? That's cool. Let me hit me with it.
Well, first of all, I'm very mad at you for not telling me this beforehand because
Yeah, I
I have
just
to like cycle through everything the Rolodex in my mind.
all right. Let's do something recent you've watched and liked. Okay, I just made this
All
question
right.
up right now, man. Sorry.
No, you're fine. I can do the two-prong question. So for book, I have to recommend, apart from what I've been mentioning during this podcast, I have been reading was it The Temptation of Saint Anthony by damn it, I forgot his name. Another French dude, another 19th century French dude, Flaubert, Gustave Flaubert. Of course, I found him very interesting. A Catholic, he raises some very interesting theological points when it comes to the idea of temptation and those kind of hermits that are running in the desert. He does a fantastic job with both his styling, his prose is fantastically literary, as well as those kind of nagging questions of theology that some people who are like cradle Catholics, converts, reverts, whatever, always kind of ask themselves, and he does a fantastic job with that. And for film, I would probably have to say, very underseen Japanese black and white film, very punk rock, Electric Dragon, 80,000 volts. If you've seen Tetsuo the Iron Man, it's very much similar to that. It's basically two guys having this crazy electricity battle all over Tokyo. You've never seen anything like it, and it's one of my favorite hidden gems. So
Awesome.
that's it for me.
I actually just recently watched a Japanese movie. I think
Really?
contemporary, current one. The Drive My Car.
Yeah, I've been meaning to watch that myself, actually.
Yeah, and it's based on a what's his name? My brain is rotted today. But the big
No, there you're fine. You get a pass.
The big Japanese writer, what's his name?
Oh yeah, I don't know big Japanese writers.
Haruki Murakami. Right.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It's based on one of his short stories, and it was a fascinating film because it was freaking 3 hours long. It's great, and I like watching a lot of foreign films because the narrative like format is so different in Japanese film and Iranian film compared to our 3-act structure American movies. So like it's more slice of life. It's more like fleeting. The narrative comes and goes.
Definitely.
And Drive My Car was a fantastic example of that. I highly recommend that. But yours is great because I've really been getting into Japanese cinema, and
I could recommend like a bunch of movies just right now. I'll definitely send you some I recommends.
I'm like one of those guys that, because I lived in Japan for 4 years, right? And I'm like a weeb that's not a weeb. All right, I don't like anime really.
You
I don't
definitely come across like that.
I don't like any of the things that when people associate with Japan, but I like their convenience stores and I like their kind of like artsy movies and their weird fascination with rockabilly and that kind of stuff. You'd be surprised how punk rock and rockabilly Japan is. Like on the down low, it's like there's actual.
I've heard of some of their stuff. I've seen some of the clothing at least.
Yeah,
it's very interesting.
You'll go to places in Tokyo and it'll be like punk bars and in restaurants and like clubs and stuff that look like 1978.
The thing with the Japanese when they have an aesthetic fixation, they really go all out. And I think this is something I was reading in Simon Reynolds' Retromania, which is another fantastic book. But he's basically talking about how they're so fixated on the idea of the American past, they'll reproduce it to the best of their ability and almost always kind of outdo it, which is what you get like from like the Japanese American Ivy League prep kind of style.
Right.
That was popular way back when.
Or their jazz. They love jazz in Japan. And some of the
baseball.
I don't like baseball. My wife does, but
that's fair. I don't like baseball.
Just never got into it,
Yeah.
But I don't like any sports except for like volleyball or something. Sure. But yeah, you go to these jazz bars in Japan, even like in crappy little cities, and they have these full on jazz nights, and they have a full bunch of old guys playing jazz, and that's what they do for fun. And they're so into it. They have bars where, there's just it's like a record bar, and they have like just everything's just like a giant library filled with vinyl. And you just pick one out and the bartender plays it, and that's kind of the whole vibe of the bar. But I will say the coolest bar I've ever been to was actually in Taipei in Taiwan. And it was called the Roxy Rocker. And it had it played like David Bowie, and it was completely like 70s like glam style. Bar. Yeah, it was amazing. Like it was like the highlight of my trip. I mean, going to Taiwan was great all around, but it was one of my favorite parts of the trip, going to this bar. We went there like 3 times because we liked it so much. All right, man. Noah, thank you for your time. It was a pleasure having you on, and I want to have you on back again as soon as you write something.
Oh, thank you.
We'll come back.
I'll let you know.
I feel like we can talk for like 6 hours, to be honest. You know?
That's the problem, though. Someone should stop us.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So, man, have a good day, and
thank you to you, dogs.
This will be out soon, so share it with everybody, and then thank you to all the listeners. Please share and like across all social media. Go and buy Noah's stuff. All right, support the independent scene.